how exactly we can do that. Do send through your suggestions, your thoughts, exactly how voting went for you in your areas, and we'll hopefully try to get to those as well. Like I said, we continue to give you rolling coverage across the country as to exactly what is the situation in certain parts of South Africa where the people are indeed continuing to vote, their disgruntlement if need be, and of course how happy they may be as well to be sharing their or casting their ballot as well today. The 8th of May, the 6th democratic election here in South Africa. Palesa Moeti is in the city of Roses, Bloemfontein in the Free State as well, giving us an update with that situation and that part of the country. Palesa, how are things faring?
Well, we are at the Results Operations Center here in Bloemfontein, and we know that in the Free State there's about 1.4 million registered voters. And just on a quick progress on how voting has been progressing here in the Free State, the IEC has reported that while most of the voting stations opened on time, there were some glitches and problems in some of the voting stations. For instance, in Marquardt, where we know that there's a service delivery protest that is ongoing at the moment, there was a delay because extra police had to be brought in to escort IEC staff to the voting stations, and that resulted in those voting stations opening at about 10 o'clock this morning instead of 7 o'clock as should have been. But also in rural areas, we know that here in the Free State it's been raining since this morning, so rural areas, particularly in the Karib district, the roads are quite slippery, and that has also delayed the opening of some of the voting stations in that area. And then also in Kwakwa, we know that there's a voting station that is based in a tent, and that tent was stolen. So obviously a new tent had to be acquired, set up, and so that was also delayed in terms of opening time this morning. But despite those incidents, voting is underway, and just a few minor incidents were reported by the party representatives. They are based here at the Results Operations Center, and they get their information from the party agents that are based at the polling stations. And they've said to us that the problem of people taking selfies behind voting booths still exists, and these people also post these photos obviously on social media, and obviously it's not permissible. And also the issue of booths. Some of the voting booths, party agents have raised that they are not really private. They're facing a direction where people are able to see the people's options, those that are voting. And also another issue that was raised but which was also quickly resolved was an issue about a ballot paper that was found to have an ink stain, but apparently that ballot paper was not really a ballot paper but instead a poster that had been put up at one of the voting stations so that people can view it and familiarize themselves with what an actual ballot paper looks like. But that matter was quickly resolved. Another poster without an ink stain was put up so that people can be able to see, what their options are. But joining us right now is political analyst Dr. Choice Makheta, and we're just going to thresh some of these issues that have come up. Dr. Choice, thank you very much once again for talking to us today.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure.
Let's first start with the selfies that we are seeing, that we are hearing rather, people still taking, although it's been said over and over that that should not happen. What's your take on that?
I think it's an era that we're living in. It is clear that by law it should not happen, and by law it is punishable to do that. But the youth, in fact, in this era, it's very difficult to be private. So to explain privacy, and again, I think it also goes back to voter education. It is said now that it's given that the IEC does not have enough budget lately to be able to go extensive with voter education and to explain why it's not allowed to actually take a selfie. But for the youth and for a lot of people, it's going to be very difficult to understand why, when they have voted and they don't want to keep their own vote secret, so that needs to be explained so that we keep the dignity of the voting process as it's required.
Now let's talk about the youth vote. These young people that are so eager to share, what their choices are. Are they really eager to be going to the voting stations to vote? Are we seeing them participating?
Well, what I've seen so far, they're excited. It's a pity that we have a very small margin. I mean, we have a small number registered. I think out of about 1.8 million, we have just about 300,000 registered. But that number, remember the youth, it's only now that they will be waking up and until 9. The youth prefer to go to voting stations in the afternoon. They link it to their social life to say, from here we're going there. They make it an outing. So they will still be going. They're excited. I've seen a lot of youth wearing the T-shirts and the regalia of different political parties. They are excited.
And then we're seeing quite a few political parties, new political parties coming into play. I mean, with the previous elections, we had only about 16 parties contesting in the Free State. Now it's 28. That number has grown, obviously. What's your take on the newcomers?
I think the newcomers felt that they have something to offer. They have an alternative to offer. Free State in particular has had a lot of problems. As much as the ruling party, which is the ANC, has been a majority and will continue beyond this point being the majority if the people vote as such, is that there was some way of stifling people from actually expressing their voice and finding their place. So when people want a different home, these new political parties provide an alternative. But some of them are questionable. I mean, when you look at the leaders, people shift from one political party having been accused of so many things, and then they start their own. Because during campaigning, there was a leader who was asked to say, by the way, you were part of certain things. Now, how is your party going to avoid those? And for this process, I will only avoid to mention a political party. But the voters will decide. But it's good for democracy to have more parties. It says the environment is conducive to have more.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Choice Makgeta. That is political analyst Dr. Choice Makgeta, who, has made it quite clear that in terms of youth participation, there is some eagerness, but also perhaps to some extent a lack of understanding of, how the processes work in terms of, having to register and also making sure that one is ready on the day of voting. But with that, it's back to you in studio.
Yeah, thank you so much for that there, Palesa Moeti. Of course, out in Bloemfontein there in the Free State, as we said, continuing to give you that rolling coverage there as SA decides 2019. We'll be back right after the short break and give you some more rolling coverage across the day. South Africans, I hope you are indeed going out to vote today and that you are indeed making your mark. Do stay tuned. This is SABC News. We're live from the Results Operations Center in Pretoria. Do stay tuned.